more Americans have died under Biden than under Trump. America needs strong leaders, not weak ones. Stop.
Side.
In Kansas, violence broke out between pro and anti-slavery forces in a kind of preview of the Civil War. And the outrage in northern states was so intense, it led to the creation of the Republican Party.
He thought making concessions to Southerners was what was necessary to preserve the Union.
Not even Pierce's hometown could forgive him for the Kansas-Nebraska Act.
They burned him in effigy in Concord because of his pro-Southern actions.
Pierce's political woes could only be matched by his personal ones. All three of his and his wife Jane's children died young. 11-year-old Benny, the last surviving one, killed in a train accident traveling with his parents just 2 months before Pierce's inauguration. The grief was almost more than First Lady Jane Pierce could bear.
So to win,
Lavrov should meet on February 24th. February 24th in Europe. But if Russia takes military action before that date, we'll be clear that they have slammed the door shut on diplomacy. They will have chosen a war, and they will pay a steep price for doing so. Not only from the sanctions that we and our allies will impose on Russia, but the moral outrage the rest of the world will visit upon them. You know, there are many issues that divide our nation and our world.
After insurance companies ended the voluntary waivers for co-pays, deductibles, and other costs, now researchers say nearly every COVID patient is paying. A lead author of the study says he worries that the costs could dissuade patients from seeking care. He believes the issue could be avoided if the federal government requires costs to be waived, as they are with testing and vaccines. Congress is
amid a spike of violence in the war-torn region. Vice President Kamala Harris also met with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on the sidelines of the security conference. Harris has warned Russia that it will face unprecedented economic penalties if it invades Ukraine. Lines of communication between Moscow and the West remain open. The American and Russian defense chiefs spoke yesterday. French President Emmanuel Macron scheduled a phone call with Putin on Sunday, and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov agreed to meet next week.
Russia continues to
against the Munich Security Conference. They said they gathered in the Bavarian capital to stop the war path of NATO countries. The protesters marched through the city carrying banners reading "Implement the Ukraine-Minsk Treaty" and "War Never Changes." Now, in what ways is Russia amping up military activity? Just today, numerous reports have come out of the eastern flank, including Black Sea Fleet exercises and joint nuclear drills with Belarus. Today, Russian President Vladimir Putin oversaw massive drills of his country's strategic nuclear forces, along with his Belarus counterpart. The exercises involve multiple practice launches of intercontinental ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, the Russian Defense Ministry said. Biden says he doesn't foresee any nuclear response to the tensions and believes the drills are meant as a show of force. The Russian Defense Ministry also released video footage today showing Black Sea Fleet exercises involving the Bal and Balstian coastal defense missile systems. The exact location of those exercises was not disclosed. Looking now to former President.
Facilities not open to patrons. One of the guys said, "You only gotta tell us once," and I said, "Okay." After that, they pulled out guns and started shooting at me.
The contracting supervisor says he was startled. Bullets just started flying.
It was about 15 to 20 shots. And, I dove toward my car. There were two shooters shooting like Glocks with an extended mag in it, and they just kept shooting and running backwards.
The 51-year-old father used his car as a shield and dodged most of the bullets, but one struck him in the hip. After emergency surgery, he will now have to learn to walk again.
I have to rehab, got a fractured hip, which the bullet lodged into my joint. And so they had to pull it out in surgery.
There is some good news. The shooting victim tells me police got a pretty good look at the shooters from surveillance video from a camera that was in the area. They hope now that that video will lead to an arrest. In North
escalating rapidly. President Biden believes President Vladimir Putin is moving forward with an attack.
And I'm convinced he's made the decision. We have reason to believe that.
His remarks at the White House came after speaking with top allies where they pledged to pursue diplomacy and be ready to impose economic consequences should Russia attack. Still, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is scheduled to meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov next week if Russia doesn't invade by then.
Russia can still choose diplomacy. It is not too late to de-escalate and return to the negotiating table.
Satellite images reveal the extent of recent military activity near the Ukrainian border. 40 to 50% of ground forces have moved into attack positions. President Putin also planning to oversee Russian military nuclear drills over the weekend as shelling between Ukrainian forces and Russian-backed rebels intensify.
I see this as a provocation.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's president is planning to head to Germany for the Munich Security Conference. But Fox has told NATO allies and White House officials are worried by his decision and believe Russia could exploit his absence.
Somebody should pick up the phone and call President Zelensky, like right now. Don't leave your country to go to Germany tomorrow because you may find the airspace under the control of the Russians.
The Biden administration says it's
who can I help? We all have a duty to the bravest of our country. I'm Dan Nevins.
Facilities not open to patrons. One of the guys said, you only got to tell us once. And I said, okay. After that, they pulled out guns and started shooting at me.
The contracting supervisor says he was startled. Bullets just started flying.
It was about 15 to 20 shots. And, I dove toward my car. There were two shooters shooting like Glocks with an extended mag in it, and they just kept shooting and running backwards.
The 51-year-old father used his car as a shield and dodged most of the bullets, but one struck him in the hip. After emergency surgery, he will now have to learn to walk again.
I have to rehab a fractured hip, which the bullet lodged into my joint. And so they had to pull it out in surgery.
There is some good news. The shooting victim tells me police got a pretty good look at the shooters from surveillance video from a camera that was in the area. They hope now that that video will lead to an arrest. In North
Later, video shows what appears to be the same man in the same jacket coming back for more.
Yeah, apparently it was too easy for him the first time. Even though we made some arrangements to change up the locks, he still brought bolt cutters, and he was very determined to get in the second time.
Finally, he gets in. Between both days, more than $15,000 of prime steak and seafood gone.
It's just such a violation. It takes away from the servers that we have here and what money that they can make, because now we're not able to serve as many guests. And it just, unfortunately, they're the ones that get hurt the hardest.
In Roswell, Mary Smith, CBS 46 News.
Several students were involved with this. The photos were taken after school, but inside the school building. Some parents say when they saw them circulating on social media, they were irate.
Among the pictures where they're giving the Nazi salute, this one really shows that the photographer himself is doing it. He's engaging in the same type of behavior.
Brad Epstein scrolls through the photos shared on social media. A boy wearing a tan coat and armband with a swastika. School officials confirmed the photos were taken inside East Cobb Middle School, where Epstein's daughter goes to school.
Shocked, a little bit worried. She was mad.
The principal sent an email to parents saying some students made a very poor decision and displayed hateful anti-Semitic imagery while recording themselves on social media. In her email, the principal wrote, "I am saddened and extremely disappointed that some of our students would engage in such ugly, disruptive behavior. Our administration and staff have made it a point to stress to our..."
That defeating Trump would start to heal our divisions. I certainly did. That maybe, just maybe, the madness would break. We have faced these challenges here in New York at a time when our nation is deeply and dangerously divided. Now, it is one thing to have political disagreements. Those are natural and healthy. But it is an entirely different thing altogether to lose a shared sense of truth, facts, and reality itself.
By saying during a 2016 meeting that he was not acting on behalf of a particular client when he was actually representing the interests of the Clinton campaign. And a technology executive who had furnished him with data and analysis about potentially suspicious internet data involving a Russian bank and Trump. The lawyers for Sussman argued that if the indictment goes ahead, it would mean people could be prosecuted for giving an accurate tip to law enforcement if they weren't upfront about their motivation for doing so. They also maintained Sussman did not lie. The motion to dismiss comes just days after a filing by Durham, which some incorrectly read as a suggestion that the Clinton campaign illegally spied on Trump.
No, man. This ain't no jam session. Stop jazzing it up, okay? All right, let's pick it up with Go Down Moses. Go down, Moses, way down.
On race. Ban most discussions of sexuality and gender identity in schools.
The Tennessee School Board under fire for removing a Holocaust novel from its curriculum.
Spotify taking heat once again over its most popular podcaster, Joe Rogan.
A new Georgetown law administrator has not even started his job yet, but he's already facing calls to be fired.
I would argue that the culture of free speech is under attack in the U.S. And without a robust culture of free speech based on tolerance, the laws and constitutional protection will ultimately erode.
Jacob Mshangama is the author of a new book that documents the history of free speech.
People both on the left and the right are sort of coming at free speech from different angles with different grievances that point to a general loss of faith in the First Amendment.
The free speech erosion is even happening in schools. Since January last year, Republican lawmakers have introduced more than 150 state laws that would restrict how teachers can discuss race, sexual orientation, and gender identity in the classroom.
It's about making up false narratives to further a political goal of your own.
Jennifer Given teaches high school history in Hollis, New Hampshire.
It's a really scary time to be a teacher. We're self-censoring. We are absolutely avoiding certain things and ideas in an effort to stay within the lines as best we understand them.
In New Hampshire, a new law limits what teachers can say about racism and sexism, and a conservative group is offering a $500 bounty to anyone who turns in a teacher who violates it.
The ghost of Senator McCarthy is alive and well in some of our state house hallways.
What would happen to you if you did step afoul of this law?
That can result in the loss of your license. And so I would not only be unemployable at my school, but I would be unemployable anywhere.
But what I don't understand is this is New Hampshire, whose motto is live free or die.
Yeah. There's a lot of emphasis on the or die part of late.
Speech is evolving. It has to evolve.
It's probably no coincidence that the new censorship culture arose simultaneously with social networks like Facebook and Twitter.
The First Amendment was conceived as a protection of citizens from restriction of expression by the government and not by private companies or other entities.
Jillian York is the Director for International Freedom of Expression at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and she's written a book of her own.
So, for example, Donald Trump getting kicked off of Twitter and Facebook. Is that censorship? Is that bad censorship? Is that good censorship?
I think Trump getting kicked off of Facebook and Twitter is kind of complicated. But the thing that really concerns me the most is that someone like Mark Zuckerberg, whom none of us elected, has the power to remove an elected official. I think that should really worry us, even if we do feel that Trump should be silenced.
York says that the big tech companies censor our speech every day, sometimes by mistake, but always without supervision or transparency.
We saw protest content around Black Lives Matter removed on Facebook's platform wrongfully. LGBTQ content has been removed, as well as things like art and satire.
According to Mshangama, social networks censor us in another way too, by making us afraid to speak at all.
It was actually the survey from 2020 by the Cato Institute, which showed that 62% of Americans self-censor who are afraid to sort of express their political views on specific topics. And I think it shows this paradox. Americans enjoy the strongest legal constitutional protection of free speech probably in world history, but they still fear the consequences of being fired for speaking out on certain political views. And that's not a healthy sign.
But it's not just America. Since 2019, at least 37 countries have passed laws that increase censorship of individuals or the media, including in Europe, where Jillian York lives.
There's a lot of debate right now in Germany, for example, over a fairly recent law that restricts hate speech online, but also creates penalties for things like the country's insult law. So, insulting someone online could be penalized financially.
Overall, it would be easy to get depressed by these attacks on free speech, especially if you're a teacher like Jennifer.